This week, news about the new Sentinels roster has come out, but is it enough to make us consider them the best NA team once again? Sentinels have been one of the organizations that people have been looking at the most keenly since the partnership teams were announced, as they're a team that we know are willing to spend. And until this point, there's been some big questions about whether or not they would want to stick with some of their staple players from the last couple of years, names like TenZ and Shazam, or if they would want to drop them in favor of a big refresh. And even though Sentinels haven't seen international success in 2022, they're still heralded by their loyal fanbase as one of the best teams, if not the biggest brands, in North America. The team flamed out in both stages of NA Challenges this year and failed to qualify for either Masters events nor Champions through LCQs. So it's clear that if they are to revive the reputation that they made for themselves in 2021, they're gonna have to make some pretty big structural changes in order to achieve that. Now, one of the biggest things that Sentinels have received flack for in the last year is their coaching decisions. They famously had no coach for quite some time, using their IGL Shazam as the next best thing, and then at the end of 2021 they brought in FaZe Clan's Raucus to see them through Champions, and then he came back in Challengers 2 of 2022 after a bit of a break. However, now we're seeing Sentinels make some pretty strong structural coaching decisions as they announce the induction of new head coach Psycho and strategic coach Kaplan. In my opinion, these are pretty huge coaching pickups. Psycho is best known for being the head coach on XSET for the last couple of years, helping take this otherwise underestimated roster through first place of Challengers 2 and all the way to the next 2 consecutive international events. In the video interview that the org released, Psycho spoke about some of his coaching philosophies, about how he really values team time to help build relationships and faith outside of the server, and also his commitment to good practice schedules that match what they would like for their match day schedules. Given that Sentinels have seemingly previously lacked a strict structure, especially regarding backroom staff that other top teams have boasted, this seems like a pretty big change for them. And while yes, it's sort of one that they have to do because of the rules of what kind of rosters you have to field for next year's VCT, I think it does lay some very promising foundations for the future of the team. So what about the players? As of right now, Shazam, TenZ, and Dapper are all still listed as members of the team, with Shazam and TenZ about to come to the end of their contract, putting them into unrestricted free agency, which could see them leave. And reports between today and yesterday have actually really suggested that Shazam is on his way out. But even thinking about Sentinels without Shazam and TenZ feels a little bit wrong. Shaz has been on the roster since April 2020, and he's seen them through 3 Challengers wins and 2 consecutive Masters wins. Meanwhile, TenZ was the hero who stepped up when the disgraced Sinatra was forced to forego his spot on Sen's main roster. His sheer skill as a duelist took the Valorant scene by storm, and he became the golden child of the Western regions. But the results didn't continue to hold up. As other teams around them improved, Sentinels seemed to struggle to keep up, and these titans seem far less invincible as time went on. The question with these players, particularly with TenZ, isn't even about whether they're good anymore. I think it's more about how they compare to the development, the needs, and the pre-synergizations with other top players. For example, if Sentinels took a duelist from another org, could they also bring along another player who has a proven track record with them? And would the value of those 2 players together outweigh the value of TenZ's potential with just one of those players? As it stands right now, TenZ and Shazam have not been announced to be leaving the roster. However, there have been reports of other players who will be joining the roster. Now, when I wrote the script for this, Def and Zekken were both just kind of rumored, but since then, Zekken has actually been formally announced by Sentinels to be joining the roster. Def is still waiting for that, so that's been reported, but not officially confirmed. However, that's pretty huge because both of these 2 players will be joining their head coach, who has taken them to 2 international events this year. This is also pretty big because the XSET roster was allegedly meant to have been bought out in its entirety by G2, and then G2 lost the partnership spot. So this is an opportunity that Sentinels have seen and taken advantage of rather than planned out very far in advance. Def is the IGL for XSET, one whose value has been more and more openly stated as time has gone on and success has come to his team. He's also very flexible. In the past, he spent a lot of time as the main smoker, predominantly playing Astra, but he's also spent a significant amount of time of his career on the Sentinels, Cypher, and Killjoy. Looking at his time at Champions, he was leaning towards initiators such as KO and Breach. Zekken, meanwhile, has been arguably the star player of his team. While Xset's main Jet chamber player, Cryo, has been bought by 100 Thieves, Zekken has shown mind-blowing performances across a range of agents, notably Neon Rays in recent history, but reaching all the way to the hard initiator of Sova and the Smokes of Omen. This gives Sentinels a lot of power in just 2 players, but it also gives them a ton of room to build around them. If they want to keep Tens as the primary duelist, they can. If they want to keep Shazam on the roster as the hard initiator, they can. Personally, I could see them choosing to keep Tens as he's such a figurehead of the org and a major branding icon. And he's just simply a great player. And I think with this restructuring, that could really help him kind of carve out that reputation that he managed to form in 2021. However, I don't know if I see Shazam remaining. I think keeping him on the roster would kind of push Def into being a smoker, which seems like a little bit of a waste of his more recently tuned skills. Personally, I'd like to see Def stick with his initiator role, then you can have Zekken in as your second duelist, but then they could also keep Dapper in the team, but have him return to the initiator role that he was originally known for. After that, they can either keep Tens or find another very strong primary duelist, and then they just need to get a smoker, and I mean, a really hot free agent that I can think of for that would be Marved. But would this make Sentinels the best North American roster again? Well, I think the answer to that is in how the structure works. This may sound like a cop-out, but I so strongly believe that Sentinel's biggest letdown over the last year has been their weak coaching structure and the lack of a top-down authority and discipline on the team. Sentinels has felt from the outside like one of those kind of old-school player-run teams where they don't really want someone else from the outside telling them what to do. And in my opinion, that's a fucking awful way of running a team. And I think it's let down players like Tens, who have had so much potential, but get swept away when not robustly supported by his teammates. And that lack of support in a lot of cases has come from the reactionary playstyle of Sentinels, as opposed to a default-heavy or strongly strategized one. But given the recent and consistent success of Xset over this season, and given the fact that we have elements from that roster both in the coaching staff and in the players, that screams good things to me. I think the culture in the team will very much be derived from what it was like in Xset, and having players who are also from that roster who can kind of be that bridge between the more strict coaching structure and those players who are not from that same background, I think that's pretty important. The strategy from Kaplan, especially with the insights of an ex-player, which is something that Sentinels always really valued, alongside that kind of larger style structure and philosophy from Psycho, seems very beneficial to me. It's hard to call if Sentinels are going to be the best North American team again, especially when you have these potentially emerging super teams in Cloud9 and NRG, but this is a good start. And for those perpetually loyal fans, after this past year, that in and of itself is gold dust. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I think Sentinels are such an interesting case study in American Valorant, just because of how their past has been, their story's been, these players who have remained on this roster for a really long time, but not necessarily seen their full potential in the past year. What do you think is going to happen to these remaining players on the Sentinels roster? And do you think that Tens is going to stay a part of it? And I really hope that those questions aren't answered before I upload this. Regardless, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.